today is February the 5th, 2014. We're at the Jewish Community Center, and I'm interviewing Dr. Adrian Meyer as part of the Roots to Boots project for the Dallas Jewish Historical Society. Dr. Meyer, thank you for being with us. Would you mind if I call you Adrian?
Not at all.
Thank you so much. Well, let's start, if you wouldn't mind. Tell me what you know about the history of your grandparents on both the maternal and paternal side of your family, starting in Europe, if you know some history of that sort.
Probably very little. My paternal grandparents I didn't know too well. My grandmother I never met. She had died already when I was, I think before I was born. And in fact my sister was named after her, so so I never met her, but my paternal grandfather, who was from Lemberg, Lemberg I believe was part of Austria, and I think it was annexed by Poland, or vice versa. And then he came to South Africa, and he failed to become a citizen and was still Austrian when the First World War broke out. And he was interned, and his property was seized. And subsequent to his internment, he was banned from living near a port and lived, I think he had to be more than a certain number of miles from Cape Town, where he lived in Stellenbosch, which was outlying from Cape Town. And there he had a furniture factory. And he was a cabinet maker for many years, until his latter years he came to live in Cape Town, and then he went to the old age home in Cape Town. So he died really in my youth. On my mother's side, my grandparents both came from Russia, and I think he came from Kurland. And my grandfather was a tailor, and my grandparents had 6 children, and so my mother was one of the 6. There were 4 sisters and 2 brothers.
Do you know how your parents met?
I suspect it was at Muizenberg. Muizenberg was a sort of seaside resort where many young Jewish couples met. I think they met there. I'm not quite sure about that. I suspect that was the story.
And so where did they first live when they were married?
Well, my father had studied in England. He'd studied pharmacy, and then when he came back, he went with a friend of his. They both settled in the same little town outside Cape Town, and he became a pharmacist. He was a pharmacist, and so I think they lived in, from what I remember, they lived in Parow since their marriage.
And how many children are there in your family?
Just myself and my sister.
Is your sister older or younger?
She's older. She's 2 years, 10 months older than me.
What can you tell me about your childhood? About what it was like, family life, schooling, the neighborhood you lived in, whatever you can recall.
So we lived in the main road. It wasn't a very upscale kind of place, or anything, but in fact it was a railroad or railway area. So the government workers the white workers were employed by the government to a large degree, and they used to move them around to maintain the political status. Parow was one of the large Afrikaner areas where a lot of railway workers lived. It was not very expensive to live there. So there was a strong Afrikaner element in the area, and it was probably lower middle class whites. I remember, of course, there were no blacks living in white areas. I remember that there was a fair amount of alcohol that used to flow. There was a number of bottle stores, and people used to be fairly inebriated Friday evening when they got their pay. The schools, well, I suspect the schools weren't that bad, because I went to public school from preschool to middle school, and then high school, which was from standard 6, which is a part of middle school. My parents sent me to Jewish day school, which was in the city, so I should take a train from where I grew up to the city and then catch another bus to go to the Jewish high school.
And how far was that from your hometown?
So it's probably about 15 or 20 miles, the trip, entire trip.
Were there other Jewish families in Para?
Yeah, there was. It was quite a nice shtetl, really, from that point of view. There was a shul there, and subsequently was rebuilt. And interesting story is that the replica of the shul was built in Herzliya in Israel.
Really?
And one of the members of the shul, when the shul closed down, took the Torah from Para and took it to Herzliya in Israel. And I assume, I've never seen the shul, I've never been there, but I assume the same Torah is there now. So, and there was, I think, about 100 families. And we used to have a Russian rabbi. And he, if you read the stories about the old Cheder days, I suspect that he was the original form of the rabbis of those days. They used to give you a clip if you didn't do what they wanted you to do, and you didn't follow their lessons very well, or if you didn't come up with the right answers. So he was quite a character.
What else can you tell me about Jewish communal life?
So it was actually quite a well-knit community. You know, the people all got together when it came to the major chagim, like Simchat Torah and excuse me. So they got together and they used to have a community hall. The old shul became the community hall, and so it was pretty close, and it was very, very pleasant. You know, the people were always very supportive of each other.
Did you have, did all of the children go off to Jewish day school, or did any of them stay in the public school?
I think I was the first one to go, and then subsequent to me, there were a number that followed, also going to the Jewish day school. But a lot of them didn't go to Jewish day school. A lot of them went to the city, but went to other schools, the larger schools.
Would you consider your family Zionist in nature, or the community Zionist in nature?
I don't think there was a strong Zionist influence, although I remember going to B'nai Zion as a child, but I don't remember much about that. I don't remember having any particular Zionist influence.
That's interesting. Many of the people I've talked to had a very Zionist upbringing, so it sounds like perhaps this community was different than some of the other South African communities. Do you think so, or is this just
I just wasn't aware of it.
You weren't aware of it?
No. And when I think about my peers, I don't recall any of them sort of emigrating to Israel or much activity in terms of Israel.
I see.
I mean, we all bought trees, you know,
right,
or forests, but you know, but as far as emigrating or strong Zionist movement, no.
No youth movement of any kind.
There were. As I said, there was B'nai Zion. I know outside Para there was Harbonim, which was much more active, but in Para there was just B'nai Zion, and that didn't. I don't think it lasted long. I think one or two enthusiasts, and then they faded, and the whole movement faded.
So you grew up there, and you went to school.
First locally, and then I went to the city.
Then you went to the city. And then at what point did you meet your wife? How did that come about?
Well, after I graduated med school, I went, I left the city and I went to another town, which was a coastal town called Port Elizabeth. And I started practice there. And while I was living there, I met Binky. She'd come home from I think she was working in Johannesburg. And she came home from Johannesburg to spend some time with her parents. And I met her on the beach.
Beaches seem to play a large part in the
Well, because everybody spent their time on summers on the beach.
I see, okay.
Yeah.
So you met on the beach? And,
Yes.
And you married?
Yes.
And what year was that?
That we got married?
Mm-hmm.
Well, sorry.
Can we turn it off?
Um,
So what year did you and Binky marry?
1984. You haven't got me on, have you got me on recorded now?
Yeah.
No, you have? Oh, right. Yeah, 1984, just before we emigrated.
Well, and so had you talked about immigrating before you married then?
Well, yes. What happened was, I'd come here and I'd written the exam. In fact, I wrote it in 1978. In fact, at the same time as people that had come in the first wave of immigration, that a number of doctors, including Brian
Ellman.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So we were there in Austin at the same time writing exams. And after that, I travelled around and I looked for a job. I got a couple of offers, and then I had to advertise the job. And then I went back to South Africa while I waited for the job to mature, which never happened. But in the meantime, I was working in Johannesburg. And while I was, but I met Binky before, we moved to, we both moved back to Johannesburg. She was in Johannesburg. So while I was working there, I decided to subspecialize in internal medicine, which there is not a primary speciality. So we planned to get married and go on vacation. So we started thinking about we would go for our honeymoon. And so went to this travel agent, and we described what we wanted to go to. It was this nice, quaint beach resort, which was quite far out of the way. And I stepped outside and I said, you know, this is crazy. We should go to America and go and see. I mean, I had this license, and in fact I was grandfathered in, so I could come and open doors right away. I didn't have to do any other exam. So we talked about it and we decided that would be a good idea. So we got married and we came to have a look-see.
And you stayed?
Well, when we came to have a look-see, there was an enterprising lawyer who had taken the list of all the people that had passed the licensing exam and sent me a letter years earlier to say, if ever I wanted a job, I should just call him.
Do you call his name?
So, Wellington Smith. He was from Austin. So I phoned him up and I said, you know, we're coming and I might be interested in a job. So we came to Dallas and we met him. I remember we went to the Omni, and I was so impressed with the size of this hotel. It was just unbelievable. I mean, you know, coming from South Africa, nothing like it. And all the statues and so on. And he took us up to the restaurant at the top, you know. Anyhow, so he had a job offer somewhere out in Stephenville. So in the meantime, I found the local medical association and said, well, there might be an opportunity here. And I was interviewed and they offered me a job, but subject to me getting accepted to a hospital, which happened to be St. Paul Hospital. But St. Paul wouldn't accept me. just before I was leaving America, they wouldn't let me give me privileges unless I'd worked in America. Well, it was a catch-22.
Right.
So I couldn't accept that job, but I had a job offer in Stephenville. So I decided I wasn't going to leave America without a job offer. So I left America, and 6 months later we came back because I had a green ticket then.
Right.
And I went to work in Stephenville.
Uh-huh. What did you think of that small little town?
Well, you know, there was something about working in small towns in South Africa. It could have been very exciting, but it didn't pan out to what I'd expected.
Uh-huh.
Particularly having come from quite an academic hospital, to land up in Stephenville was sort of like a setback. You know, there wasn't this kind of academic stimulus that I was used to, and I found like, you know, my ideas didn't exactly gel with the locals in terms of practicing medicine, because there was quite a gap. So that took some getting used to. And of course it was also the cultural shock of going from Johannesburg, a major city, to a small place like Stephenville, which at that time I think was like 10,000 people, with about 5,000 of them being students. So that didn't last very long.
How long were you there?
We were there for 2.5 years, and then I got a position at St. Paul as a resident, so I could get American boards, because I realized if I wanted to come to the city, I better get American boards.
And this is before you had any children, am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
No. We had a child when we were in Stephenville.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Okay.
No.
And was Binky working at all at the time? Or?
Well, when I went to St. Paul, she was still in Stephenville, and so she took a job there. She worked in the childcare, and so Batya also used to go to the childcare there.
Uh-huh. So then you came to Dallas.
Right.
And when you came to Dallas, at that point, how many other South Africans were there here in Dallas, or were you part of an established community at that point when you came in, or?
Well, I'd always been friends with Brian.
Right.
Okay.
So you knew Brian.
So, in fact, that was one of the reasons I landed up, I think, in Dallas.
Uh-huh.
Because Brian was here. And Brian and I go back to Port Elizabeth days.
I
Brian
see.
was a radiologist in Port Elizabeth, and then he came to America, and so I was communicating with him, and you know, he encouraged me to come.
Was there anyone else?
So he had
that you
quite an
knew?
important role in me being here.
Was there anyone else that you knew in Dallas besides Brian when you came here?
Yes, I had a classmate, well, it was semi-classmate from Johannesburg, Stephen Perkins.
Oh my gosh.
So Stephen Perkins was here. In fact, he was instrumental in me getting the job at St. Paul, because he'd also been to St. Paul. So in fact, he played a major role because he got me that job. So Steve played a role, and then there was also Alan Pizer, who we became friendly with through Steve. In fact, you know, Steve and Alan used to come and visit us in Stephenville. So that was a big thing, to coming here with that sort of support. And you know, I think support when you're coming from a small place like that to Dallas was very, very helpful.
So all in all, from your experience then, the South African community was welcoming?
Oh yes. And then we had a group of friends in a similar situation, a number of doctors and so there was Perkins, there was Pizer, there was what's his name? Fellow who used to do sports medicine at Cooper Clinic. And there was another radiologist. I can't. No, it comes to me.
How did you find the rest of the Dallas community outside of the South Africans in terms of the Jewish community in general? Was that a welcoming
Well, because I don't think that we were here, except that because Batya needed to go to play school or preschool, we got involved with the J. We had been members of, or have, Shaarei Tefillah. We were country members of Shaarei Tefillah, the first country members. So when we came here, we used to go to Shaarei Tefillah, although I don't think there was sort of any extension to, when we came to, they didn't extend any particular welcome when we came to the city, but we became members, but we used to come in for Yom Tovim to Shaarei Tefillah. And then of course the J was very helpful to us, particularly at that stage, because I was a resident. I didn't have much money to pay for Batya to come to preschool. But we've been members of the J ever since. I think we're going to be double bar mitzvahs very soon with the J. But the J was pretty much helpful in terms of Batya.
Do you have other children as well? Or
No,
just
Batya's,
the one child?
Yeah.
And so the J played a big part in your acclimatization. My pronunciation is terrible. Acclimatizing to the community, and obviously it sounds like it plays a big part in your life still to this day.
I don't come much to the J, but Pinky does. She exercises here regularly. I used to come here for tennis, and then I started playing elsewhere, and didn't come very regularly after that.
Did you get involved in anything else from a community standpoint here in Dallas, other than obviously your very active medical practice?
Well, no, I didn't. No, I can't compare myself to Saul.
I don't think anybody can compare themselves to your Saul. What about your wife? Did she get involved in other things?
Yeah, well, Mickey's with, she goes to the book club. I don't think she's got any significant other involvement.
So, from a overall perspective, I guess we would say, if I'm correct, that your reason for coming here was to Dallas in the United States was for business reasons?
No.
No, not for business reasons?
No.
Was it for
political reasons?
For political reasons. Okay, we haven't talked about that. So tell me about the motivation.
So, when we were getting married, the other part of the consideration was that it didn't offer a future for raising a family, as far as I was concerned. At that stage, the Afrikaner government was entrenched. This was way before Mandela's release. And it didn't look like the government was going to change anytime soon. And I couldn't see that this was a place to bring up a child under these circumstances. And that was the major motivating factor to leave the country. I think many white people, particularly Jewish people, wanted to avoid the continuity of being involved with the Afrikaner government.
Had you been involved politically in any type of protest movement, or
No.
But you just thought you couldn't stay there?
No. No.
Are there customs that you brought along with you that you still practice today that are particularly that you're particularly fond of, that remind you of your home country?
I don't think so, other than following the Jewish tradition that we had in South Africa, but I don't think anything specifically South African. I mean, you barbecue here and we braai there, but other than that, I don't think there's any major difference in our lifestyle.
Any foods that you
Well, there's South African foods definitely,
Mm-hmm.
and until we recently had a South African store here, people always were saying, we're going to South Africa, bring back this or bring back that, in terms of foods that you got used to, the candies and so on.
So there's a store here?
And here's a store here.
Where is that?
That sells South African foods. It's up on Coit.
What's it
It
called?
used to be on Frankfurt and Ohio, and then it moved.
What's the name of the store?
I don't know what it's called.
Are there significant things about your life that we haven't talked about that you would like your children to know? Either about your family, the family history, things that you think are particularly important from a personal, historical standpoint, things that you'd like to leave as a legacy that we haven't discussed?
I wouldn't call it leave as legacy, but I think that I represent in our family a certain milestone, in that there were a number of grandchildren, but of all the grandchildren, only myself and a cousin graduated university. And so we were the first in the family to go to university and graduate. Others did well, but I was quite proud of that. You always believe that your children will do better than you. And I like to believe, that my daughter has got as far as she has, to some degree, because I was benefited from this education and the ability to be mobile and to come to America. And I think that the opportunities that she gained by growing up in America were some opportunities that she would never have had, from both an educational point of view and a sports point of view.
Tell us about your daughter. What she's accomplished, a little bit about her life.
Well, first of all, we called her Batya, and liked the name Batya because it was a good Hebrew name, and we felt comfortable calling her Hebrew name in America. We felt that there wouldn't be any restrictions because she had a Hebrew name, as opposed to if she was in South Africa, it would have been a problem. Batya was always a good student, and then around about 6 she started playing tennis, and she became very adept at playing tennis, and she was in the state finals 4 times when she was playing for Plano West, and she started playing for Plano West when she was in middle school. She played for the senior school, and she was pretty highly ranked, and she had some offers from universities, but she decided to give up tennis and rather concentrate on academics, and she did pretty reasonably at university. She went to Kansas and she did advertising, or what do they call it?
Marketing?
No, it's,
Public relations?
no, it wasn't public relations. There's some other term for it. I can't remember what they called it. But yeah, it was basically marketing and advertising.
What sounds like?
So now she's working for a company downtown, and she's doing very nicely there. And she's very happy in her job there.
Excellent. Why do you think you were different from the rest of the cousins? What made you succeed as much as you did, and where the others did not quite get there?
I don't know. That's maybe opportunity. It's difficult to tell.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to add?
No.
Terrific. You've been wonderful. It's been great getting to know you. I really appreciate your time and your coming out after such a busy day at work.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Successful. It might be, I don't know.
Prevented you from getting involved in other things.
Yes, yeah.
Do you think you would have done it differently? So, if you thought about it afterwards.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just, it's just me, the way I socialise. I'm not a social butterfly.
Well, not everybody has to be.
Yeah.
But
well,
are you
but I think to do these things you have to be more outgoing, perhaps.
Well, it's a difference in personality. But is that
Well,
something to?
I suppose that my personality is suited to it.
I think Adrian's being very modest. He has a very large practice, and
Oh,
he has
I
done a lot
understand
of
that.
things, a lot of areas. So
Yeah, that I'm aware of.
I think you might want to.
I don't think that belongs in there. No, I don't think that.
So he's.
But you know, you look back, as you know, I'm about to turn 70, and I think, you know, there's something maybe. And I was head prefect at school, and so I sort of felt like I was heading the right way at one stage, and then I don't know what happened. I suppose it's all the change that came about, but other people
But you
had the
were-
same changes, you know.
Yeah, but you had you came out with a very successful medical practice. I don't know where you think you failed.
Well,
Or-
you know, I look at Saul, and I think, you know, Saul
Well, I mean,
Saul
I don't think
really was exempt. Was more than a great example.
Saul was exotic, you know.
Yeah. But he's also, compared to me, he was much more sociable kind of guy, you know, hail fellow, and I don't think I fell into the same category.
I don't know that anybody can compare themselves to Saul and measure up. I don't think that's a fair comparison for any of us.
Well, you know, you always got to look at other people and say, well, that's a good example.
Well, absolutely a good example, but to consider yourself less of a man because you don't match up to Saul Lurie.
Well, you know, I just feel like, you know, the way I grew up, having gone to a Jewish day school, and that it was sort of meant that you should have done more in terms of Yiddishkeit.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, you still have many years ahead of you.
True, but not in a very active way. When you start getting to 70, you know, you're not going to have that much influence. You know,
Oh,
most of these people have
absolutely.
had influence. They've had it during the height of their careers.
Oh, I think you still have opportunities.
Well, maybe they'll present themselves.